Hey, what is up, everybody? I'm here to give you guys my Halloween movie review series, number 25. And yes, I know, I just said number 25 in the last video, but I had a miscount. I've been so far behind with doing this, and I've been just doing so many in a row that I've lost count. So this actually is number 25. But if you go on the playlist, I have every single one of the Halloween movie review series on the playlist. In that playlist, and it will say number 25. It does say how many of luckily, I went and counted, but I pretty much lost count. This is what happens when you go a while without doing them. But this is actually number 25, which means I still have a little bit a ways to go when it comes to reviewing these movies. It's a good thing I caught this too. I would have missed one. But the one I'm going to be doing now is called The Strangers. And I've actually got yet again requested to do this by Mike Sell. Originally, I actually didn't even have this on the list. And when he had requested for me to do this, I was wondering, like, why didn't I just do this to begin with? Because I really should have, because this movie is fantastic. I think this movie is good from top to bottom. And ironically enough, I've been looking forward to reviewing this movie for a few weeks now. And I've reviewed. I think this is going to probably be my favorite one out of the series. Because I thought it was better than all the Halloween franchises, all of the Saw franchises. I thought it was better than Happy Death Day, everything in the Ghostbusters franchise, and everything. I thought it was better than the Cloverfield franchise. I thought this movie was absolutely fantastic. I thought this movie was really good from beginning to end, and it was just a fantastic movie. I've actually seen this before. I saw it a couple of years ago. It's I don't think it's a favorite movie, but my aunt and uncle really liked this movie, so they showed me this movie, and it's like fantastic. And I think it's a I can't really explain it right now without going into detail about it, so I'll start doing that. First, let me kind of say how this movie was created and stuff. So, um, Brian Bertino, who's who wrote this movie, he actually has a quote that I want to actually read because it will kind of explain a little bit about how this movie was created. I was thinking about the Tate murders and realizing that these detailed descriptions had painted a story of what it was like in the house with the victims, but none of the victims knew about the Manson family or why it was happening to them. So I got really fascinated with telling the victim's tale and not filling it in with an FBI profile and not filling it in with finding out that somebody's grandmother beat them up and now they want to kill everybody. You read obituaries every day where someone is killed for a random reason. Yes, we may eventually find out why, but sometimes they don't. And this is a quote from him on his inspiration for the film. And it was obviously to the Tate murderers. Ironically enough, I was kind of reading a little bit about the Tate murderers. They took place back on both in August of 1969, and I didn't really read too much into it, but a lot of the stuff I was reading is a lot of the stuff that's actually in this movie, which is I think pretty interesting actually. And Yeah, and pretty much this it created this film. And originally, when he wrote this movie, this was supposed to be called The Faces. It doesn't really say why it changed to The Strangers, but it did. Um, and he had gotten this. He had gotten. But Bautino had gotten really fascinated with horror movies because he grew up in the 1970s when slasher horror films were huge ergo, the first Halloween that came out in 1971, I believe. That came out in 1978. You had Friday the 13th that came out in the 1970s. And other movie, just to be, just for a few examples. And then, um, you know, it also came, but this particular film was inspired by true events that took place in his life. He said that, and this is another quote that he said, "As a kid, I lived in a house on a street in the middle of nowhere. One night, while our parents were out, somebody knocked on the front door, and my little sister answered it. At the door were some people asking for somebody who didn't live there. We later found out that these people were knocking on doors on the area, and if no one was home, breaking into the houses." And that actually comes, um, you know, but there was obviously other murders that took place around this time. Um, in interviews, Bartino said, I'm just going to read this word for word, stated he was very impressed with some of the theories circulated on the internet about the true events the movie is allegedly based on, but said that his main inspiration was the true crime book, Helter Skelter, about the Manson family murderers. Some journalists speculated that the film was inspired by the unsolved Ketty Cabin murder of 1981 that occurred in a small vacation community in California's Sierra Nevada. The film's premise has been compared by some film critics to the French horror film Them, which was released 2 years earlier and pretty much has to do with the exact same concept. And that's pretty much how this movie became to be. And then obviously they went through the casting process, and um, Liv Tyler and Scott Speedman, who are the main who are the main actors slash actresses in this movie, love the script. They love the way that um, Brian Bartino wrote it, so they went with it. And Liv Tyler was actually had hadn't acted in a while because she had a kid, so this actually kind of got her back into acting a little bit. So that's pretty interesting right there. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. Though, late I can't think of anything else. Um, so now I'm just going to kind of get right into this movie. This movie was produced by Doug Davison, Roy Lee, Nathan Connie, and Sony Malhai. Malhai. Davison actually backed out of the project because it doesn't really say why he backed out of the project, but he said he backed out. And then Brian Bartino also wrote this movie and directed the movie, and then the music was done by Tom Andy. Peter Sova was the semi-tography. The cinematography was done by Peter Sova. It was edited by Kevin Gertrude. He's edited a lot of horror movies I've seen. I think um, he edited some of the Cloverfields, I believe, and I think he edited some of the Saw films. So he's edited a lot of the films. The production company it had three of them: Vertigo Entertainment, Mandate Pictures, and Interpret Pictures. It was distributed by Rogue. The movie came out on May 30th, 2008. Originally, it was supposed to come out in the summer. The movie was actually being filmed in 2006, and then they wanted to have the movie come out in 2007, but they kept having to push it up, so eventually they just pushed it up to the summer of 2008, so I thought that was pretty interesting. And this movie had a $9 million budget, and you can kind of see that not a lot of money went into making this movie, but something I've always found when it comes to movies is the weird thing is the movies that don't have a lot of money that actually go into them, end up being great movies, and the movies that have a lot of money that go into them end up being bad movies. See Halloween. See the Halloween remakes that Rob Zombie made. See that, but then you look at the example Halloween. The first Halloween didn't have a lot of budget going into it. Ended up being fantastic. Saw 2004, same thing. So I'm just saying, like a lot that does happen. So now that I've kind of discussed this, let's get right into talking about this movie. This movie pretty much kicks off. If you've ever watched like Law and Order and stuff like that, it kicks off with the person talking about how this movie was inspired by true events, and it talks about it actually it talks about how this took place on February 11th, 2005, I believe was the date they said, and it we have it talks about how Kristen McKay and James Hoyt went back to their house, and they were found the next day, and we don't actually know exactly what happened in these events, but these are inspired by true events. Obviously, this event didn't really happen. It sort of did, but not with this situation. So, yeah, but when the movie kicks off, this movie too looks like an old school movie. Like when I saw that this movie came out in 2008, I was surprised because it looks very old school. The movie was filmed like in 2005, but the movie, but still, the movie looks like it was filmed, like back, I would say maybe like in the 70s, just with the way the camera crew works in this film. But yeah, so we see James and Kristen going back. James was in. They had said he was going to his father's place. He has a place up in. His father has a summer home. It doesn't actually say where it takes place. But before that happens, we see these two young boys come up with their bikes. We hear somebody calling the cops, all distraught about what they've seen. We see blood on the wall. We see somebody's red and on the ground, a knife covered in blood, and we weren't supposed to have known it actually happened. This was the so I kind of like that they showed this, and then they show the events that led up to that. So it shows James and Kristen coming back to their summer home, and they're all upset. Pretty much what happened was James had tried to propose to Kristen, and she had said no. And when they go back, James has pretty much set up the place all romantic. He has rose petals set up everywhere in the bathtub, and he has like a romantic dinner plan. He has some fancy champagne, and you could just kind this was just, it just didn't go that well. You could just feel that they were upset. They're not really talking to each other, and pretty much you could kind of feel that the relationship's probably going to end because she had said no, and it even kind of shows a flashback of it, and I actually kind of like the way they build up to it. Like we didn't necessarily know why they were upset. We had kind of known that something had happened, but we didn't know why. And then when it shows the scene, then you're kind of like, ooh, now you know why. And you can see that James is just all upset. Kristen's all upset, but eventually, they're starting to talk about it, and James wants her to keep the wedding ring because he can't take it back, and he plays the record player, and they were about to pretty much have sex, but then somebody knocks on the door, and when they answer it, they asked it was this girl that probably looked like she was about maybe 15, maybe 16, and she asked if one of her friends, Tammy, was home. And she said, no, it's the one house. And this is, by the way, at like 4 o'clock in the morning, too. So that should have been suspicious in itself. So then she kind of like stares at him for a while, and then she's like, okay. And then and then she leaves. And obviously, this is kind of where that tie-in came in from Brian Bartino, where it came in from his childhood. You could see that scene was placed right here. So that was very suspicious. And more stuff happens with that. So then Kristen runs out of cigarettes, so James goes to get her more cigarettes. And then I guess they were supposed to go on a road trip too. So, and James says, and James just tells her to take the car and leave. He said he's going to get picked up by his friend Mike. And then so then James leaves. Kristen, she was wearing a dress, so she puts her jeans and stuff back on. Goes into country clothes, and then the same woman knocks again, and asks where Tammy is, and she says, "You've already been here." And then it continues to happen. This girl continues to knock on the door very aggressively, so this concerns Kristen. So she grabs a knife just in case, and then she calls James with her cell phone, and well, she charges her cell phone, and then she calls James through like house phone, and we actually see that. And then she tells James that this person keeps coming back, and James pretty much says that he's always going to be there, and Kristen says that she wants James to stay on the phone with her, but then they cut the phone lines, which was a reference, obviously, to the tape motives. And also, what we had seen was there was this guy that was wearing a mask. They were all wearing masks, but what Wikipedia says that this guy, because we don't actually find out these people's names, so it just says "man in the mask." So that's just what I'm going to call him. He's watching Kristen right behind her. He has made his way into the house, and he hasn't actually killed her. It was just psychological type of stuff. I thought that was great. And then somebody keeps just banging on the door, knocking on it, and Kristen grabs a knife. She looks through the window. The man in the mask is looking right through her, and this scares her. And instantly, when this happens, the record player instantly starts to play as well, which I thought was great. Then Kristen, Kristen had locked the door, and then someone manages to get it open. And who do we see looking through it? None other than the doll face. No, the pinup girl. Just looking right through. And this was pretty much, I think, supposed to have been the same person that knocked on the door. So this scares her. We also had seen that the fire alarm had went off because James had set a fire for Kristen when he left. And the fire alarm had been moved because she had taken it out. And then somebody, I'm assuming the man in the mask, also had taken her phone when to charge it, and later on, we don't actually, when James and Kristen are walking around, we see that they put her phone in the fireplace, setting it on fire, which makes sense because obviously now they can't call the cops or anything. But yeah, so pretty much after Kristen sees these people, she starts screaming, telling them to go away. I thought that was a very good scene. And then, then it stops, and we hear someone walking through the house. Kristen thinks it's going to be one of the strangers, but we find out it's actually James. He actually had made his way back, and Kristen tells James what happened, and James checks all through the house and doesn't see anybody there. Then when he looks out the window, he sees the pinup girl looking right at him, right through the window. And James then is going to go grab his phone to see, so that way he can call the cops. But then when he goes outside, he sees that his car windshield has been smashed. And then when he goes to look for his phone, he can't find it. So then he comes back. And when he was looking through his phone too, one of the strangers had tapped him on the shoulder, freaking him out, which I thought was a great scene. And then when he comes out, we see the pinup girl looking right at him, and he asks her what the hell she wants. Doesn't answer. And then when they go back into the house, then James finds his cell phone, and they see that they took the battery out of his cell phone. And then Kristen keeps asking him why they're doing this, and James wraps her arm up because it got cut, because I think because she had taken the lamp down. And then they're pretty much just gonna leave, and they go to leave, and when they back out of the driveway, we see the doll face girl driving in the truck. So they try to pull back in, and then the man in the mask is standing right in front of them. So the doll face girl rams the truck right into their car, and causing them to run away. And they destroy their car, so now they can't leave. They're stuck there pretty much. So James remembers that his father used to have a gun, so he grabs his gun and loads it with bullets. He reveals that he didn't know how to use it because he's never used it before. So so he wants Christian just to take off and run as he attacks him. And one of the strangers takes an axe and just starts breaking into the house, just destroying the door. So they take the piano and move it right in front of them, so they can't get in. And Kristen's able to load the gun, so James shoots them, but misses. So then they go into the closet, and they pretty much stand guard, holding the gun, and pretty much holding themselves. And a quote James said that I like is, "We're not gonna die here. We're gonna wait here until the police show up." So then his friend Mike shows up, and his friend Mike calls him to let him know he's there. He's probably a little bit out of it because he's probably been drinking. And then one of the strangers throws a rock at his windshield, breaks it. So then he goes into the house, and when he goes into the house, we see the doll face girl just peeking right out, which I thought was very creepy. And then Mike's walking all through the house, and behind him, the man in the mask has an axe, like he's gonna kill Mike, but it never happens. And then when Mike walks in, James shoots him, thinking that it's one of the strangers. But then he sees that it was his friend Mike, and they get upset. That this distraughts him. So, when he opens the curtain later on, he sees on the window one of the strangers had written "killers," which I liked. And so then James is just gonna go outside, hide in the tree, and shoot one of them, and see if he can get the authorities. So then he sees the doll face girl, but then the man, when James is just about to shoot her, the man in the mask ambushes him and beats him up, but you don't actually see what happens to him. So then Kristen is stuck in the house by herself. And this, by the way, this was like the worst thing they could have done, was separate. So then the man in the mask is right behind her, but Kristen runs away before he can do anything to her. She doesn't even know that he's there. And she trips and hurts her leg, so she can't really walk anymore. So she has to crawl. Wow, I can't say crawl. Okay. And then she makes her way to the phone, And throughout this time, we see that the strangers keep. One of the strangers comes up. I think it was the doll face one, and acts like she's gonna murder Kristen, but doesn't happen. But it doesn't happen. So then she goes into the bone. She finds a ham radio and is about to contact the cops. She can't get a signal, and then of course, right when the cops answers, the pinhead girl comes up and smashes the ham radio into like a million pieces. So Kristen crawls out and escapes, and then we see that they've lit their car on fire. So Kristen makes her way back to the house, and the man in the mask actually walks right by her. I mean, clearly he knew that she was there, but the goal behind these strangers is they don't want to just kill them and scare them. They want to scare them psychologically. So Kristen hides into the closet. The man in the mask pops up, thinks that he sees her in there, but doesn't. So then he sits on the couch and leaves, and Kristen thinks she's going to be safe, but then the pinhead girl rips the hinges, like the blinds, off the closet door, and then she stops, and then Kristen comes out, and the pinhead girl grabs the ring, is about to grab a knife. Kristen asks why she's doing this, and Kristen grabs a knife herself. They have like a little standoff, and then the man in the mask comes in with James, who's been beaten, and Kristen runs away, and she hears something happen to James, and then Kristen continuously screams baby and leave him alone. And then when she goes out, the man in the mask throws Kristen right into the wall where a picture frame was being hung, and then he drags her, and she starts screaming, but we don't actually see what happens. And then the next morning, when Kristen and James come to, Kristen's actually back in her dress she was wearing earlier, and Kristen and James are both tied to chairs, and Kristen asks why they're doing this, and I believe it was the doll says, because you were home, which I love that answer. It was just a nice, simple answer. And then they take their masks off. Kristen tells them that they don't have to do this. You can change. You can be a better people. But then each of them take turns stabbing both James and Kristen. And then the next day we see the same two young boys who obviously work with the Catholic Church, and one of the strangers, because now we don't know who it is because their masks are off, come out and asks them for a flyer, and one of the boys asks if they're a sinner, and she says sometimes. And then when they leave, we hear one of them say, now it's going to be easier to do it. Because and then then the boys go to the house. They walk all through the house. We see everything that's happened, kind of saying, okay, now we know what happened. And then we see James and Kristen laid out like they're dead. And then when one of the boys goes to touch Kristen, Kristen grabs her and starts screaming, and then the movie ends. And then that was the end of the movie. And yeah, overall, this movie was really good. What was very good about this movie was that it was intense. It was suspenseful. It actually legitimately scared you, which is a good thing to have in horror movies. I thought the cast was really good, and it was just a really good movie. It was a simple story too. And I kind of like how they slowly built up to the strangers finally get him, and the way that the strangers psychologically scared Kristen and James. I thought that was very good. So overall, if I had to rate this movie, I got to give it a perfect 10. I can't think of anything wrong with this movie. It's a perfect 10 out of 10. And there's nothing really wrong with it. Some people have given this mixed reviews saying, some people have liked it, some people hate it. Some people I don't think liked, how the movie kind of, let me see if I can kind of read. It says, I'm gonna see like if I could find like a sadistic, unmotivated home invasion flick. So I guess they didn't really think that that there was much of a reason why the strangers were invading the house. Some people didn't like Bautino's directing and writing skills. And yeah, but some positive, the stuff that I've been saying, the directing, effective, how smart it is and stuff. So this movie receives mixed reviews, which is good. I think, and as for a sequel, there is going to be a sequel. There's going to be a sequel coming in March. I think it says March 9th, around that time anyways, 2018, and I will be seeing that in theaters, so I'm looking forward to watching that. I can't wait. I thought it was coming this year, but I guess not, so I can't wait to see it. I wonder what they're going to do to follow this up, and I hope it's good. Like, I'm afraid that I don't think it's going to be as good as this one, though, but as for box office draws, this movie, when it originally came out, the movie in its opening weekend, it grossed $21 million in 2,467 theaters. It ranked number 3 at the box office and averaged about $8,514 per theater. And then the box office return was a successful for a horror film, earning $82.4 million at the box office worldwide. So that's very successful, considering the fact too that because box office draws can be defined. Because I know I've said before that there's been movies like Ghostbusters that didn't have a great box office draw. Well, this movie only had a $9 million budget, so it didn't have to live up as big of a box office draw as Ghostbusters 2016 did. So that's just that. As for the cast, like I said, not a lot of cast here. I already kind of said who plays the main characters. Gemma Ward played Dollface. Kim Weeks played Man in the Mask. Glenn Howerton played Mike. Laura Margolis played Pinup Girl. And Alex Fisher and Peyton Clayton Luce played Mormon boys. These were the young boys from the church. So that was the cast, and that's pretty much my review, guys. Thank you guys for watching this video, and I'll talk to you guys later.